Welcome back to another episode of The Climate Gap. Today we are focused on the growth segment, and I am thrilled to be joined by Alex Grace of Clockworks. Alex, welcome to the pod.
Thank you, Lewis. Great to be here.
I know we've gone back and forth over the years about doing an episode, so I'm pretty stoked to have you on, and I think there's definitely a lot to be talking about on your side.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure we'll cover some good ground. Thanks for having me.
So where did it all begin for you? Talk us through high level, a bit about yourself, Clockworks, how it all began.
Yeah, sure thing. I've been in this little niche of a world of fault detection and diagnostics for over 15 years now, and really actually started there right out of college. So was really interested in renewables and various environmental motivations there. And when I understood what opportunity really existed on the efficiency side of being able to consume less energy in buildings, I was really attracted to that. So started working in that field right out of college, and I can share a little more what those early days were like. But had a great mentor who pulled me in, and we started a business together in Boston, helping buildings use less energy, and really early days on analyzing data from buildings and trying to figure out how to provide reports on a regular basis. So that was the really early days, kind of just before cloud had really become a thing. And pretty quickly, when we saw the opportunities when cloud came on the scene, there had been a big change there. So I spent a couple years there on a pretty wild ride with a lot of venture capital involved, and then found Clockworks Analytics in 2012. Company was called KGS Buildings at the time, and really right place, right time to be able to come in with this incredibly impressive technical founding team. And it's been about 12 or so years since then.
Okay, there's obviously a lot to unpack, but most probably don't know this, but you studied and graduated with a political science degree. Help us understand how you go from political science into...
You're exposing my secrets here, Lewis, live. I generally, keep that one quiet. Political science is probably not what people think of when they see me do a Clockworks demo or answer engineering questions. But yeah, that's right. I 2008 came out of graduate college in 2007. Spent some time traveling. Started working in 2008, and there isn't a direct connection there, except that it was a good general background in terms of being able to analyze information and communicate ideas effectively, which is really what all go to market comes down to, right? And I'd say on the technical side, really school hard knocks, learning by doing, walking through mechanical rooms, asking every question I could possibly think of in the early days. And that's been really important to me in my career, is never feeling like I know enough technically, like always asking more and more questions. And especially in the beginning with Clockworks, amazing to be surrounded by so many talented, PhDs who I could just ask questions to constantly. And that's the culture I've tried to create at Clockworks on the go-to-market side as well, that we never have a culture of saying, oh, I'm just a salesperson, let me get you in touch with an expert. I never want that to be the answer. Of course, we say we don't know, and let me get back to you when you don't know. But that there's an enthusiasm to always learn more has been important to me.
From a leadership and sales strategy standpoint, you lead a fairly lean team. I'm sure people probably think you lead a bigger team with how much you do within the space, but I think you've got enterprise sales, partner sales, and customer success. I'd love to get your thoughts in terms of like your approach to building what we would class, me and whoever's in NMC, as a high performing sales team, and those strategies around it.
Yeah, great. Appreciate the question. It's nice to reflect on these things. You don't always have the chance to do it when you're in the trenches and fighting through. Leading a high impact sales organization or a high impact commercial organization, which includes these different pieces of sales, account management, customer success, marketing. When I think about creating that alignment, I didn't have a playbook. I didn't come from a larger company that had all these pieces already fleshed out. And they're all moving even in the broader SaaS industry in terms of core responsibilities across these different dimensions. So I think it was really organic for me starting as an individual contributor, as a one person sales um, business development manager, I think was my first title at Clockworks. And now as chief commercial officer, having about 18 people across these different teams that I'm responsible for and serve. And I think when I say organic, it's really about uh, a lot of common sense, So when you're out there selling in the early days and then saying, all right, I'm spending a lot of time here with these existing customers and making sure that they're successful, I've got to really focus back on growth. Let's bring in our first customer success hire, right? And then that starts to grow, and then we bring the partner side. So it has been a fair amount of organic um, uh, leadership decisions, I would say. And then when you see the playbooks that sort of have formed within SaaS, there's a lot of commonalities there and some differences based on the specifics of our segment. But I think maybe some things to mention, right? Like, so in the early days, had no resources to build a sales team, and had an army of interns doing cold calling with scripts. College students, I had 3 at one time. I made one of the interns the king of the other interns. Shout out Theo. And and we were just doing what we could with the resources we had, right? And then eventually we have more revenue, we have a little bit of investment, and had some trial and error to really find the enterprise AE that would really be successful. And I think a really key thing is making sure that you have a formula and understand the predictability of what you're trying to accomplish before you scale it. When I look at a lot of the mistakes that get made and a lot of cash that gets burned, and then um, the downstream effects of that, it's usually trying to scale before you have repeatability in your go-to-market motions. So that's really key thing. I could add a lot to that, but maybe I'll pause there for you.
Do you get the impression that people they run before they could walk in terms of getting the go-to-market and also the product market fit segment correct?
Definitely. I find people looking for magic a lot, and there isn't magic. How do you scale a sales organization? Is having, first of all, you need a great product. That product needs to be providing value in a way that your customers are willing to not only renew and expand, but talk about it, right? And I think one of the things that being really lean forces you to do in terms of being disciplined is that when we had no marketing budget, we were highly focused on everything has to do with telling our customers stories and helping them look awesome because they are awesome. So that means submitting together to speak at conferences, that costs very little money, right? And then building around those events, helping publish their stories and celebrate their successes. That's really key. And I think so that's key, right? You need a good product. You need to tell those customer stories. That's the most important thing. And then I would say, just on the back of that I see a lot of people making mistakes that founders often make, is you think, okay, I've got one salesperson, I need to have 5, and I'm going to 5x my revenue. And what's missing there is that, this isn't always possible in the early days, but how it should be is that sales captures demand. Sales does not create demand. Marketing creates demand. I would say in terms of lessons learned, we invested in marketing a little late, I would say, in the overall journey. And that's really essential, that to be able to tell those client stories in a broader way, marketing creates the interest and the demand, and sales is there to really capture that. And what I always say about enterprise sales is you're actually project managing the enterprise sales process. You have to know how your customers buy and helping them buy and navigate their own internal bureaucracies, which is not a small thing. It actually requires a lot of knowledge to do that well.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, you're a member of Pavilion, right? And I'm not sure how deep you go within that particular community, but often when people reach out to us that have little to no experience in this space, but they may be a phenomenal account executive or within the go-to-market team, they don't appreciate or they don't yet understand how complex and difficult selling technology, building a go-to-market team can be in this space, which typically moves so slow. I don't know whether you've seen any major differences within just what you're seeing within Pavilion or just broader within the tech space, which is just completely different to actually doing it in this market.
It's true. It is really different. I think Pavilion's been great. I've learned a lot there, and I can comment on a couple things in particular. I think the thing that doesn't relate oftentimes is just you have to um, high velocity sales motions. So a lot of SaaS companies, you have a smaller ACV, average contract value, and shorter sales cycles, and you have a motion in place which is fill in that pipeline and trying to find all the conversion metrics from the top of the pipeline converts to this stage to that stage down to one opportunity, and what are your ratios, and therefore how big does your pipeline need to be, and all that is relevant to a certain degree. But oftentimes when you're talking about a 2 month sales cycle for a various Zoom or some kind of like piece of technology that is very horizontal, not vertical, that looks very different. And the iterations and yeah, a lot of how you manage those kind of sales motions is very different than when you're looking at a 6 to 12 month plus sales cycle. 6 month is optimistic. Yeah.
Yeah, very. Well, I guess you're selling the FTD platform that you've got. Maybe it is more realistic, but would you say just on the sales cycle average is what? If you're talking multiple building adoption, it's what, 9 months, 6 to 9, 9 to 12 months.
Yeah, 6 to 12, I'd say, is somewhat normal. It all comes down to the budget cycle that you're coming into. So the way to think about it is you need your pipeline to be large enough to intercept budgets. So it's not magic that why can a deal get done in 4 months versus a year? If a deal got done in 4 months, it means there was already a budget that you just intercepted. And that does happen, but you have to have enough at bats, right, to be able to actually find those opportunities effectively. And they are out there, and they do happen for us. Um, but so is the budget there, and you're intercepting it, or do you need to create it? If you need to create it, then you're looking at that 6 to 12 month plus level to make sure that you're building the business case ahead of time effectively.
Yeah, so you're essentially you're creating the demand for the technology versus what you see in some of the other technology classes where there's already budget approved for Zooms or maybe even ChatGPT now, right?
Right. I mean, I don't exactly. So I don't personally in my professional life know what it's like to sell something that is a need, meaning, and even within our space, that's also true, right? So take IWMS or CMMS systems.
Table
You know,
stakes now,
you're
but
not going to run a facilities organization and not have a way of generating and tracking work orders, right? So that is a different sale than having to do a lot of market education on why this is something that is going to generate significant value in different ways. But there's not that many organizations, I would say, still today that have rollout FTD across my portfolio on the top of their KPI list for the year as a leader, right? So in order to do that, you need to build demand. You need to do a lot of market education to be able to create that demand and make that business case. Now that is changing as the market matures. So it's not that it's always the case. We do have organizations where we have, quote, intercepted a budget, meaning we came in and the education cycle was much shorter. It was more differentiating on why we're the right tool as opposed to the concept itself. But I would say that's 10% of the time, something like that today.
yeah.
And 5 years ago, it was probably 0% of the time or something like that. So the market has changed.
Yeah. And I wanted to read something out which I thought was super interesting that you posted today.
Sure.
Clockworks now has 7,861 active users and 500,000 over 500,000 assets streaming data from almost 4,000 buildings. Something that you said before we started record here is that the platform's already in over 1 billion square feet. So
600
give
million. Yeah.
600 million, yeah. Yeah, I don't want to cut any corners.
We'll get to billion
600,
soon. Don't
yeah.
worry.
And I think given where you're coming from, again, this is FDD focused, but you've obviously started as one of the first doing this specific application. So Do you think we will get to a position in the next 3 to 5 years where you look at like IWMS or CMMS where you think that is table stakes? Do you think FDD, like building analytics, will get there as well?
I do believe it will, and we're certainly highly focused on um, positioning the value such that FDD is a need to have. I do think we're going to look back and say, how did we possibly run facilities in our organizations without this piece of technology? That is going to happen, but it's going to it will require a broadening of the value. So if it's just energy alone, it won't happen. When it includes the core maintenance use cases of how to actually do condition based maintenance and be able to effectively transform how the scarcest resource we have, which is people's time, gets allocated efficiently in an organization, that's going to lead to very big changes. And we're starting to see that across our customer base. And we have some ways to go here. But I do believe that fault detection and diagnostics, we always emphasize that second D there as being critical. Um, that it has to be able to effectively transform maintenance operations. And when it does so, it will really be a core foundational piece of technology to run facilities and not sort of an add-on for a particular one-off energy project.
I couldn't agree more. Obviously, you're way more in the weeds than I, but I think especially with the talent shortage, FDD is only going to become more critical. Um,
That's right. The demographics problem really does matter a lot. As is more and more experienced people retiring and leaving the workforce, less experienced technicians coming in. Technology has to fill the gap there. And what we always talk about is moving from institutional knowledge to shared knowledge. That's a quote from an amazing facilities leader, Don Guckert at the University of Iowa, who would give presentations around that. Really powerful concept. And institutional knowledge sort of leaves with the person walking out the door, and shared knowledge requires technology to store the information that's relevant and needed about those assets to be able to get people up to speed faster when they encounter issues.
I love that. It's almost like this industry. This is a complete tangent, but it's almost like this industry needs a national, speaking US specific, but a national mentorship program to tie in those individuals that are retiring, so they can keep passing this information down. Maybe another business model. Who knows? Back to the sales process. I'd love to learn from your side what an effective sales process looks like, and not necessarily from a time standpoint, but like what goes into your process to make sure that the experience, both from a customer standpoint, but also internal, the employee standpoint, is a good experience.
So I think of a couple ways to address this. The first is that there has to be demand. So there has to be leads, right? Um, the atomic building block of of a sales motion or a sales organization is meetings. That's the atomic building block. It's touch points with clients. So how do you get enough qualified meetings at bats with the prospects that you want to be talking to? So that starts with defining your ICP, your ideal customer profile. Who are the people that can really benefit from our product? Specifically, what are their titles? In what sectors are they in? So when you do that work of segmenting, and that's not done on a whiteboard, that's done through trial and error, right? That's done through actual experience, of working and saying, you know what, we're getting a lot more interest over here. That's interesting. So for us early on, it was more complex, more technical facilities, the better. The needs are greater. The impacts of downtime, the impacts of reliability have mission critical effects, which is why we've done so much in higher education, in healthcare, in pharmaceuticals and life sciences. We do a lot in other segments as well, in office and in all kinds of other areas. But those high critical environments have an additional layer of value, right? So who's the ICP and what is the pain they're experiencing? I mean, this is in every sales training, but it's the truth, right? There needs to be some pain that you're addressing, and it can't just be, oh, that's interesting. It's got to be this addresses a real problem that I'm having. So in our world, I have a problem with not being able to get to the work. Every organization, we always say in every almost every meeting, right? That I've yet to meet a facilities team that's looking for another to-do list, but everyone is looking for priorities. Are my people focused on what matters most, what is most critical to the organization every single day, based on three core factors? What is the problem costing us, both in terms of energy and life cycle impact to the equipment? Another way to say that would be reliability or maintenance. And comfort. What's going to keep the phone from ringing? How do I identify problems before they become headaches? So, what is the real pain point we're trying to address? Zeroing in on that across those ICPs, producing content from a marketing perspective. That's conferences and events and webinars, that's blogs and white papers, that's speaking to those pain points that that ideal customer has. Creating that demand, generating those leads, all of that is on that top of the funnel marketing side to create those at bats, to create that atomic unit of meetings with prospects that are actually interested in what you do, right? And that actually interested is really important. You don't want to push people into meetings that are only kind of interested. You want to have those qualified at bats. Then from there, you have to be able to concisely present a compelling value proposition. In order to do that, you have to really qualify who is this person? What do they care about? I think a big mistake that happens in sales often is a lot of one-way talking, which is maybe ironic as I'm talking at you one way right now, Lewis. Um, but but I'm answering the question. But really, I would say effective sales is knowing what questions to ask. It's all about that. It's about thinking in questions, and being really curious. Really highly curious in who people are, what makes them tick, what's important to them in their job, and asking the right questions. So I think, for me, I always say I've been demoing Clockworks for 12 years to prospective clients, and it's never boring for a couple reasons. One, because the product is always evolving and there's always something new and interesting to show. In fact, I often find things mid-demo that I've never seen before, still 12 years into this, going like, whoa, I've never seen that diagnostic. And then I start getting excited in the middle of the call. That's one reason. The second reason is that I'm always presenting to people, and people are never boring. People are always different and interesting because what makes them tick, how their organization operates, is never the same. So if you think of sales as just I'm up there presenting and pontificating, and you're doing the same thing on a reel, sure, that might get boring. If you think about the individual that you're trying to understand and know and learn how you can actually help, if you can actually help, and being honest about that, that's also important, then that's a whole different game, right? So that's kind of that top of the funnel side. I've been really influenced by an organization called Winning by Design, which is fantastic. And they've done a lot of work with Pavilion too, that has really created this concept of the bow tie. So
Okay.
we think of, in sales, we think of the sales funnel. Everyone's used to the funnel. How much comes in, how much comes out. Flip that on its side, and now I've got a bow tie. The left-hand side of that bow tie is the traditional funnel. From interested to more interested to I have an opportunity to close one. That's the middle. The right-hand side, onboarding the customer, making them successful, customer success and account management, and expanding and driving growth within that account. And maybe that's also kind of a classic mistake area, is putting too much resources on the left-hand side of that bow tie and not enough on the right. Customer acquisition is one thing. In our world, every initial deal we do with the customer has a 10 to 20x potential behind it. Land and expand. So if you're not providing the right amount of resources to post-sale and making sure that you're helping your clients look amazing, hit home runs, achieve their goals, and therefore expand that relationship, you're leaving half of the revenue potential on the table and simply will not achieve the growth that you're looking for if you don't resource that right-hand side effectively.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think for context, your team at Clockworks is probably 2-1 from that right side to left.
I'd say that's probably right. Yeah.
Yeah. You've obviously been with Clockworks for 12 years. When was the moment where you thought we actually have something here? Like the go-to-market's baked, healthcare, pharma, higher ed, these are the markets that we're getting an incredible amount of traction. Obviously, you do with the markets, be like, we're all systems go now.
Yeah, good question. I think in the early days, really focused on establishing those beachheads, as you know, or these marquee referenceable case studies in each of the verticals you're trying to really go deep on, and learning what the right verticals are as you're trying to decide the segment and the ideal customer profile. So in the beginning of really establishing those core beachheads, so the moment I said, "Hey, we really have something here," is when we had impressive brand names in each of the segments we were highly focused on. So this is all public case studies. So in the beginning, that was well, certainly MIT, which is where we came from in the early days. It's a pretty big name within higher education, and then a lot of universities that came after that. In healthcare, Kaiser Permanente, in life sciences, kind of early days with Amgen being the first very large global portfolio that we rolled out across, and they won awards. All of those organizations won awards from Lawrence Berkeley National Labs or various entities that did case studies that we kind of helped to steward. So when you have those beachheads and you have those customers that the successes have been proven, documented, and third parties have recognized them, then that's very clear, like, let's go moment for sure.
Outside of growing an organization, that must be one of the most satisfying outcomes. Like, you fix the client's problem to a point where they're now getting accolades because of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I still remember this moment, and it's a clip on YouTube. I think it was 2017 within the Association of Energy Engineers World Energy Engineering Congress, I believe it's called, the event. And there was this amazing award ceremony. And the International Project a Year Award went to Amgen, and a really fantastic facilities leader, Derek Mullins, accepted that award. And it's on stage, and there's 1,000 people in the room, and they post the clip on YouTube. And he shouted out Clockworks from the stage and said something I'll never forget, which is, I really, through this project, really learned what partnership means. And that for me was just a lightning bolt moment, right? Of just feeling pretty amazing about the work we'd done together, and wanting to continue to replicate those successes.
So, Alex, we talked about some of the segments or the real estate assets that you focus in, pharma, healthcare, uh, commercial real estate, as well as also higher eds. I'd love to get your thoughts in terms of how you balanced the going direct to the end user, the customer, and also the channel partner side, because um, that's also one of the key growth areas for you, if I'm not mistaken.
It is, yeah, really fast, exciting part of our business. Absolutely. So the way we've thought about this is, it's really about, on the enterprise side, we were highly focused on organizations that have robust in-house facilities teams. So they have engineers, they have energy engineers, they have controls groups in-house. A university with 10 million, 20 million square feet has that. A portfolio within life sciences or healthcare has those engineers, across that organization. There's a lot of real estate out there that doesn't, right? A typical 100,000 square foot office building has a building engineer on site, maybe not. Um, all kinds of other parts of the commercial market. So how do you aggregate those buildings together? And that's where the partner strategy comes in. That's kind of from our perspective, right? Which I normally am presenting from the partner perspective. So there's also so that's one thing. We also, when we think about partners, we don't really think about resellers. So I'm not necessarily looking for a company to go out there and say, "Hey, I sell XYZ controls out there in the market, or XYZ mechanical systems in the market, and now I also sell Clockworks, and that's one of my product offerings." We're really not looking for that. We figured out pretty early that we're looking to actually sell enterprise software to the partner business, as opposed to a product that the partner can then resell to their clients. So what I mean by that is, we're not coming in and saying, you should go sell Clockworks to your clients. We're actually saying you shouldn't sell Clockworks to your clients. But you should bake Clockworks into how you perform services. So one of my favorite, things is I remember being at a couple conferences years ago. We'd have CEOs of control companies would come up to me a lot. It was at Niagara Summit and a couple others. And they would say, hey, our teams are really struggling to sell analytics. We're having a hard time selling analytics. And my response would always be, why are you selling analytics? You should be focused on selling outcomes to your customers. Analytics is how you drive those outcomes efficiently. And that's a very different message. I think we're actually highly differentiated on that message still in the market. So rather than, hey, how do I sell this product and what's my margin on that product? We're having a different type of conversation. Let's take the controls company as an example to say, how many service contracts you have? I have 100, I have 400. Okay, those couple hundred service agreements you have, how does your business change when you can see every one of your customers' problems and what it's costing them on one screen in your office? How does that change your approach to how you structure service contracts, to how you drive added value services and therefore pull through revenue to your business? It's a totally rethinking of the service model.
Yeah, no, I love it. Where are the challenges there? Because I think, from my standpoint, again, not sold to these controls companies, but having worked with a large portion of them in the US, one of the biggest challenges must be this change in education piece, change management education piece, because, like you said, you're changing their business model or you're changing the way they deliver the service.
Yeah, that's right. There are challenges here, and really we see ourselves oftentimes as part business development, part management consultants, because it does require that change management to the organization. And that's actually why we've built this amazing partner success team. So once we got clear, let's say half clear on the partner strategy, was really exciting to bring in actually my first mentor in this world, Dave Peck, who's done a phenomenal job selling to these organizations. And then James Donahue leads our partner success team, who's done a great job. And before him, Dennis Krieger, who leads product for us. So we've really built this playbooks out and these strategies over time and a really effective team to go in and be able to drive these kind of conversations. So the challenges would be, first of all, what are we looking for? If it's primarily a bid spec organization that has a handful of service contracts but aren't really focused on service, that's not our people, right? Meaning you're out there primarily focused on selling construction and not focused on service delivery. We need the organizations that are focused on service delivery, and the ones that understand the boom bust cycles of construction, and that they need, and that service is how you maintain revenue over time, get that. And then there has to be an investment. Essentially you're helping them start a business within a business. You're helping them begin a startup internally, and no new business offering happens without investment. It wouldn't happen with any other product. It certainly doesn't happen with this. So it means that there actually needs to be dedicated resources allocated to it. And from our perspective, that starts with operations. That if you get the operations piece right, meaning how do you dispatch technicians, how do you structure a service contract to actually take advantage of the information that Clockworks is providing? These dampers are sticking, these sensors have failed, these valves are leaking by, this loop is underloaded, there's a controls programming opportunity here, et cetera, et cetera. Here's the ROI on all of those things. If you have the operational piece solved, which is how are we going to take advantage of that information and how are we going to structure service contracts to do so, the sales will come. So that goes back to the why are you selling it point, right? So what we've really focused on is helping partners to develop that operational strategy and staff it effectively. Usually it starts with just one engineer that you're building that program around, and that you're actually centralizing that function to be able to be the primary quarterback using Clockworks, getting the work effectively to technicians. And then from there, hopefully it can be, some partners have been really effective at distributing that where the technician's actually looking at the information. Others have kept a more centralized kind of hub and spoke model, but that's the core strategy.
Okay, nice. And when you think about channel versus go to market, what would be the percentages in terms of how the business splits?
The percentages. Good question. Partner is like this year will be half or a little more than half of new business. And so it's been growing quite rapidly over the last couple of years and kind of catching up. We still have more business on the enterprise side, but I think if I look at it across the board, partner will be slightly more than our enterprise business this year in terms of growth, not in terms of the absolute baseline.
One of the points that you mentioned at the start of the podcast was around a mistake in not hiring marketing soon enough within that go-to-market segment, and obviously it's very important. Was there a reason as to why you didn't allocate resources to that, or was it just not baked into the plan?
Bandwidth, competition for resources, the normal things, you know. We did, I think we did a lot with very little in terms of, again, telling those customer stories, helping them be recognized, helping them win awards, and really telling those stories effectively. But when Sarah came on board, Sarah Fisher, who leads our marketing organization, the brand took a quantum leap forward, and that really pays benefits. In the early days, it's really hard because you're trying to make an argument to spend money on brand where there isn't a clear indirect one-to-one payback versus sales where you have a quota that person's coming in to hit. So that can look that can be a hard sell in the early days, let's say, especially with if the organization or yeah. So, but you have to do it as soon as you can, and as soon I think we did it as soon as we could. But that brand value of being recognized in the industry and performing that market education does pay huge dividends. And at the stage we're at now, I would say it's highly critical to our growth.
Yeah, what stage would you say you're at? Because there's been periods of your journey, probably at KGS is when it was previously KGS, where you'd say outside of investment, you were organically growing, what, let's say 10 to 30% year on year. But it feels like within the last 2 years in particular, you've gone from growth to scale.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's right. There are certain inflection points for sure. There's some classic benchmarks out there. SaaStr is an amazing organization for any software people listening. SaaStr.com, a huge amount of resources there on kind of the $0 to $2 million journey, the $2 to $10 million journey, the 10 to 20. And there are certain markers, right, within these different stages of revenue growth and the team size behind them. So it's helpful also to know you're not alone at those stages in terms of what you're experiencing. So that's really valuable resource. But yeah, there's certain inflection points, I think, in terms of headcount as well within the company. We're now around 90 people, heading up to around 110 by the end of the year, I believe. And I would say there's certain inflection points, like around 30 is a big one, I think, in my head, when you're getting more formalized with certain roles. You know, everyone's wearing a lot of
Systems,
hats,
yeah.
right? And now you start to differentiate and segment out a little more. Yeah.
Okay, so you'll get to 100, 110 this year headcount. That's for Clockworks anyway, considering how structured and streamlined the business is. That's pretty significant growth, because I think what just after COVID you was at about 55, 60 people. So
That
in
sounds
4 years
right.
you've
Yeah.
doubled.
That's right. And I think before COVID, we were probably 30, so, or 35 or 40, somewhere in there. It's hard to remember all, but yeah, it has been significant growth in the last years, and it's amazing. I mean, on my organization, the go-to-market side, you're sort of going from having frontline individual contributors to having frontline managers that are now building up their own teams, and that's a really exciting stage from my perspective.
Let's dive into that, because I think whilst we're on the scaling piece, there's a couple of angles I'd like to talk about. Again, correct me if this data is incorrect, but Clockworks serves clients across 13 plus countries. When you're dealing in the US, it's obviously one country, so there potentially is less bureaucracy and politics involved. But I'd love to get your thoughts in terms of when you do then venture into Europe, APAC, how you balance US growth into obviously EU and APAC growth, because a lot of companies they fall on the vine just within the US alone. Like they're unable to get to your market, which is 0 to 30 heads, or 0 to 2 million, because they have a good product, but the fit's not right, or the go to market's not baked.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything is about timing, and making sure, um, in this industry, you before I mean, we're now in the scaling phase, but in the earlier days, you have to have patient capital. You have to have the patience to grow at the pace that the business can actually handle. And it starts with that foundational understanding of right segment, right ICP, um, right level of product focus, and not trying to do too much. The strength of Clockworks has absolutely been, we have had a unified vision across the leadership of the company that we will not be everything to everyone. We are going to stay focused on doing what we do the best, better, and the best we can, better than anyone, and not trying to get distracted. And that's not always easy when you're trying to win an individual deal, and you think you have to build some other thing in order to win that deal. And especially in the early days, it's not easy. But the number one mistake is lack of focus in terms of product strategy, and therefore go to market as well. So for us, when I think about international, um, it's all about finding the right people. So we have business in a lot of places through our amazing technology partnership with Schneider Electric. That's a global relationship that began in 2012. On the direct business that I'm day to day focused on, or talking about here in this conversation, our Clockworks brand, we expanded into EMEA a couple years ago. So Europe has been a focus, and it was really finding the right person who can wear a lot of hats. Because the way I think about geographical expansion is startup within a startup. You're creating a new startup, and you've got to be at a point where you're ready to make those investments and let them grow. And the best way to do that is when your partners bring you there, and when your customers bring you there, right? So not just parachuting in, out of nowhere and trying to start from zero again. That's a good way to burn a lot of cash, to be honest. So we did not do that. We had enterprise account relationships that were really either expanding into Europe or actually began in Europe. And then we said, okay, we have to build support structure around that client. And again, that goes down to the same lean philosophy, which is you start with that beachhead. So when it was having our first life sciences customer or our first healthcare customer in the early days in the US, it's the same thinking when it comes to geography, which is, okay, who is our beachhead client that is going to be totally successful, that we're going to build case studies around, go to conferences with in Europe? Okay, we've got that client secured. Now we have to support them. Now let's start to build the team around that. And for that first hire is critical. And there's a lot of risks there, right? You got to get that first hire right. And it's got to be someone that can wear operational and go to market hats. It can't just be on one side, if you're trying to be lean. Because at least for me, I didn't have the luxury of saying, okay, we're going to start with 5 people here, right? It's like we're starting with 1. So they got to be able to do a lot of things. And, we'll make the time zones work to support the pieces we need to from the US. So Tyson was, Souter was our, Suter was our beachhead there from an individual perspective. And we now have a larger team of 6 people in Europe after a couple of years of really growing key relationships and saying, okay, now we need to support those relationships. So we actually expect a big percentage. I think look at the math, but maybe 25% of our growth this year to come from EMEA, and APAC is a bit of an offshoot of that, but we haven't invested yet in headcount. Last thing I'll say there is that to me, it's really important that if we as Clockworks are going to go into a geography, we're going to go in to win. We're not going to go in to dabble. So being really clear about what is the structure and support here we need operationally to win in this market and create that success on the second half of the bow tie on the right-hand side, like we talked about.
One of the pieces that was coming to mind there is, as sales continues to go up, how do you then ensure product market roadmap aligns with the market needs?
Great question. It's so critical, and it's all about talking to their customers. It's one of those things that I say there's also no magic around. It's like talking with clients and they will tell you, and having a lot of communication. One of the best things we've done on all dimensions of the business has been our client summit. We began that the first year. I think there was 11 people in the room. So I always say it's like start that way earlier than you think. I think that's one of the best decisions we made. And bringing people together to really create community and really learn from each other. Last year we had 100 in Nashville at our client summit. Next year in September, we'll be in Chicago. It's one of the best things we've done. We get incredible feedback from our clients and partners that are learning to each other. 80% of the content is client and partner led. So 20% is probably our roadmap and product updates. And 80% is people really learning from each other and presenting super awesome things that they're doing within their organizations. So that's really key.
Yeah, I've heard those. The summits that you host are incredible as well. Last one was in Nashville, I believe. Um, with how strong the customers that you have are and how sticky the product is to keep getting recurring revenue, um, I'm wondering how important customer success has been, because it's almost because of the product being as good as what it is, you haven't necessarily needed to invest the capital that you would typically see in the tech space. Probably not aligned, but other organizations may have to invest more in customer success. Whereas I think for your business and your team, yeah, people wear different hats, but you have a few people in customer success. Whereas with the revenue number that you've got, you'd probably see that number double in terms of the team.
It's interesting. Yeah. For us, it's kind of two pieces to customer success. There's the account management side, and there's the what we call service engineering side. So you might be right there. It is critical. It's really important. And it fundamentally, our platform is finding problems in buildings, and someone has to act on that information to actually achieve the value. So we can't do it alone. We find a lot of valuable insights and information, but the change management to effectively use that information and drive action and therefore outcomes does have to be there. And that's where the right level of support is something we've experimented with over time. And we try to be, again, really client led on that, which is asking the right questions to understand. I always say we want to provide the right level of support, which means nothing more and nothing less than they need to be successful. Meaning it's not our core business. We don't have any need to have more engineering time, with a client than they need. But it's also a real risk if you don't have enough support there and they need more help to actually achieve the outcomes they're going for. So actually, we've had a lot of clients in the last couple of years really push us more into professional services and ask for our help. I think that the labor challenges are also part of that. More organizations that either for various reasons, sometimes it's a budget thing where them getting approval on headcount is hard, but writing a contract with a clear ROI is easier. So sometimes that's a budget financial policy thing. Other times they're having a really hard time filling a position and they want us to help fill some gaps in terms of that quarterback role of helping assign work. So, on one end of the spectrum, we're providing software, we're training, clients running with it, right? On the other end of the spectrum, we might be actually sending work out directly to technicians for service vendors, for a client's vendors to actually fix the problems, and project managing that and sending the work and making sure it gets done. So we've actually started providing more professional services in the last couple of years, and that's really helped, I think, to deepen some of our relationships and some of our successes.
I love that. I think we have spoken about this previously, but there definitely isn't enough organizations looking at that professional services piece. How do you then? How does that? How do you split the professional services and customer success? Like, are they different resources? Are they competing, or do they tend to be more seamless?
So we have two core teams. We have what we call our technical operations center, which are the subject matter experts, engineers, right, who know HVAC inside and out and controls inside and out and know Clockworks inside and out to be able to provide the technical knowledge to the clients to help them move the needle and get work done. Then we have our account management team. And what I always say is our account managers and our service engineers together is customer success. You need both sides. So the way we think about it is the account manager is responsible for defining the success plan. So who's doing what? Who are the key people that need to be involved? and kind of bulldozing the road of creating the plan on, okay, this type of issue comes up. What's the workflow we're going to enact here to get that work done? Who's going to create the work order? Who's going to track the work? Who's going to prioritize it? On the customer side. So that's really important, building the plan. And then the service engineer, so I think about it visually, I'm a visual person. They bulldoze that trail. The service engineer then runs down that trail with the client, like getting wins, a Crash Bandicoot, scooping up coins, getting wins, right? And then the account manager is coming back in to document those successes and really keep the core KPIs clear and reportable, and help that organization to then socialize their successes internally and drive that expansion work. We also have the account executive still involved in helping to do that socializing and selling on the expansion side as well. And that took some trial and error there too, which is a different topic, which is kind of hunting and farming and how you create a sales organization across those dimensions.
So just a ton of multi-threading, basically, both from a sales standpoint and also delivery standpoint.
Yeah, that's right.
When it comes to sales, what would be the split in terms of new biz or net new logos versus existing?
That's a good question. The partner business complicates a bit because the partner brings in lots of new logos. But if I treat that as one logo and not many, it's probably a little less than 50-50. But I'd say at least 50% of our revenue growth comes from existing accounts and existing enterprise accounts and existing partners. So that's where that investment is really important.
Yeah, we spoke about one of the goals in terms of adding additional headcount, which has the benefits that most people would understand. I imagine there'll be people listening to that will be intrigued in terms of like financially, whereas Clockworks is like beachheads that you're talking about. Is there anything that you'd feel comfortable sharing there?
On just where we're currently at in terms of growth.
Yeah, as in like either where you're at or like where you're trying to get to, like where the next markers are for Clockworks.
Yeah. Huh. Not sure I should say it publicly exactly on the revenue side, but we're roughly doubling every 2 years. That's what I'll say. So we're driving 50% growth in our direct business year over year. Did it last year, did the year before, and looking to do it again this year and are on track to do so. So what I always say, and sometimes I've posted about this, is compounding growth is never intuitive. It's really not, right? It's like, I think back to being in third grade and hearing, do you want $1 million or do you want a penny today, 2 pennies tomorrow, 4 pennies the day after that for a month? And it wasn't intuitive in third grade, and it's still not intuitive, right? In terms of just how that growth really occurs. And the numbers do get pretty exciting, and, do my best to just keep my head down, and the team, we keep our heads down, and all of a sudden you look up and go, whoa, we've achieved the goals we set out for. We got to set bigger goals. So that's exciting.
You might have posted about this a while back, but it was either Jason from SaaStr TR or could be someone from Pavilion talking about technology vendors or startups outlining what their growth is going to look like based on people that they haven't already hired. And I think Clockworks is one of those unique case studies where the growth's there, and theoretically you don't necessarily need to hire any more sales individuals because of how slick the internal machines are working.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. And I think we're at an interesting phase where, just in terms of the go-to-market side, we're really building up support roles for the first time. That's also, I'd say, another kind of critical moment where you say, we need to make the individual rock stars we have more efficient and effective, and what's a supporting team we can build around them to do that. So I think that for us that's kind of where we're at now, whether that's, we just hired a quoting specialist to really handle the quoting process and pricing. And that's not just getting the price to the customer, but that's all the back end side of that, and making sure that machine is working within CPQ, and which is and how that flows into finance and all of those pieces, right? There's sales enablement, there's SDR type approaches, which we've been a little late to bring in, and we do have some of that now. So that kind of supporting infrastructure is where I'm at currently to boost the amount of ARR that a account executive can really achieve for their quota.
So when you're running a business and you're going full throttle, um, the leadership element of making sure that people are on the same page as you is critical, right? Um, how would you define your leadership style?
Cool. I mean, first I'll say I could not agree more. There is nothing more critical than hiring great people. It's the most essential thing for all scaling in an organization, in a business, right? And you're not always going to hit 100%. So that's the other side of that. And it's not easy, but it's the when you recognize that something is not working, making a change as soon as possible. In terms of leadership style, um, I try to be direct and when in doubt, be kind. And I often say, not being direct is not being kind. And sometimes that's misunderstood, I'd say, right? That we think we're being kind by talking around something or being overly gentle. And actually, directness is a form of kindness, right? When we want to benefit the other person by being honest with what we see and what's going on. I'm a fan of radical candor. That's sort of what I'm talking about there, right? Um, I think another thing is just, especially in a startup company, I think I've had the benefit of being in lean organizations where simply do not have time for any politics. Uh, Try to strive anyway for what you see is what you get, and maybe sometimes to a fault there, but I tend not to hold things back. I tend to call it like I see it, and I hope I think people appreciate that. Also, especially in a remote organization, autonomy does need to be earned, and once it's proven, so in the early days that's really important, and once that responsibility is proven, then as hands off as possible. I really strive for that. Certainly, that my goal is to knock down any barriers to success that person is experiencing, and really find out what those barriers are and let them run with it as much as possible. Certainly, servant leadership, I think, is really key to have that attitude as much as possible, and and to communicate really well in a way that important to me. That I always ask that people on my team communicate clearly what they need. And from day one, that they're a little bit self-led in that, right? To be able to say, so that's one of my interview questions I often ask, what do you think you would need in this role to be successful? And that they start thinking that way, right? To advocate for themselves, to be able to pull on the resources that they need, to never be afraid to say, hey, I don't know what this thing is. Can you explain that to me? Or I probably should know this, but I don't know where to get XYZ. It's like, bring that up immediately. Never a problem. Never a problem. Let's talk it through. So much worse than the alternative of trying to pretend or feel like you need to hide something. It's like, that doesn't help anyone, just be direct.
You mentioned remote workforce there. I don't think people will know, or people might do, but Clockworks, I think it was KGS at the time, they did have an in office, um, not necessarily mandate, but you had individuals going to office. Uh,
Yeah, we were
was that,
100% in the office.
yeah,
Yeah.
which I think was it Boston and Denver? I know it was definitely Boston.
Yep, Boston. We did have an office in Denver at one point within a WeWork, but Boston was the main office, and at one point everyone was there, and that was a big organizational shift that really began with COVID.
So how did that? I mean, firstly, how difficult is it running a remote first go to market team? Because I think the angle that I'm coming from is that I would find that quite challenging because of the nature in which I've been managed myself and what I feel comfortable. I like being around individuals. Again, there's this whole huge, almost political return to office, work from home, hybrid debate now. But I think again, Clockworks is arguably in this space. In particular, there's tech companies that have finessed it as well, but Clockworks is one of those companies that they have really finessed the work from home model, um, and it almost begs the question: why hasn't more companies done it? But I imagine there were challenges or have been challenges to adapt to that new model.
It's a great topic and one I feel like I'm continually learning about. There are pluses and minuses, so I want to be really honest about that. I think that the pluses certainly outweigh the minuses for us, and they come down to one core thing. Once you can recruit and hire talent, the best people you can possibly find anywhere, there is simply no going back to one geography. That is the bottom line for us. Um, we can hire the best people wherever they are and give them the autonomy to do their best work. And that outweighs the downsides of which are the casual conversation that's really hard to happen when you're booked up in Teams meetings all day long, and being able to just grab that 30 seconds, 5 minutes, and then it's kind of its own snowballing thing, right? Where then you're dropping meetings on people's calendars. That's the only way you can get the time, but then the calendar gets worse and worse. And so, those are the things that are a challenge, right? That you have to work through. I think on the go-to-market side, we're fortunate that we're on the road, right? We're visiting clients, we're at conferences, we're getting together. And that in-person piece is important in a remote organization. You've got to find the time to make that happen. So we had a go-to-market kickoff in January. We had my whole team along with our co-CEOs together, Brian and Nick, in Miami for 2 days in January, getting everyone together, including Europe. So having the leadership that really understands the importance of that if we're going to be remote, we have to find an operating cadence where we pull people together at the right points in time. To kick off the year, we did an all hands meeting maybe 14 months ago, something like that. We had the whole company together in Boston. We'll continue to do those kind of things. So I think that's really key. If an organization shifts from an office to not, is actually not letting go of that budget and saying, we're not just going to pocket the office expense. We're actually going to allocate it to team building, in-person events, flying people in, getting hotels, and allocate the budget that way.
So, Alex, moving on to the final piece, with what you've done in your career to date, a lot of individuals in this space, let's say, have 2 to 5 years of experience selling building automation or selling software products into the commercial real estate space. And I think from their standpoint, and equally from mine, it would be good to get your thoughts in terms of if you were in their shoes, or if you were going back 12, 13 years prior to Clockworks, how would you start your career to build on those pillars to get yourself into a similar position?
Yeah, great question. I think it's really looking for opportunities where you can take on more responsibility earlier. And usually that means in a smaller organization. I'm certainly biased to the startup world, but I think there's a lot to be said for that, because early in your career, you want to find ways to accelerate the amount of responsibility you can take on. And that means accountability as well. So it goes both ways, right? It's taking on more responsibility and being more accountable for those goals accordingly. And that's really what you want if you're ambitious and you want to really be growing in your career. Focus on, especially early on, focus a little less on compensation and more on learning opportunity. Where can you learn the most? And have a bit of a thesis about where you think the world is going at the same time. What products and services are going to be increasingly valuable? What are the organizations that are going to experience the most growth? Because the more growth there is in an organization, the more opportunities you're going to have as that growth occurs.
Love it. I should have asked this before, but how did you find Clockworks, previously KGS at the time?
Yeah. I was working with another company. It was called Sky Energy, in fault detection and diagnostics space. They had raised a significant amount of venture capital, acquired a 100-person engineering firm, started working with them when they had 6 employees, and we were basically a reseller in Boston. So long story short, went from 6 people to 180 people in a 2-year period, 50 million in venture capital, and had a lot of publicity and a lot of excitement around that, and learned a ton in that experience, and learned a lot about how to not run a business as well. That was equally valuable. And I met Nick Gajewski, our co-founder and co-CEO, who was actually in the same PhD program as a friend of mine at MIT. So like a lot of things in life, right place, right time, right timing, and actually had lunch with Nick. And at that time, this was early 2012. there was, this is pretty early days in fault detection diagnostics world, certainly early days in cloud technology and applications. And make a long story short, came back from that lunch with Nick and said to the first engineer that we'd hired in our office, that we need to figure out how fast we can go work for these guys. And 6 months later, we both were. And that was, I think, really fortuitous on both sides, to right place, right time. And was really blown away by the technical founding team and what they had already built at that point.
Yeah, and Nick's great. I think there's not many better leaders to aspire to work for. I'm obviously biased to some extent, but I would say that without anyway. Um,
Yeah, it was
Final.
really exciting. And there's about 60 buildings, I believe, on the platform, somewhere maybe 60 to 80 at that time. MIT was the main customer, and I think they're and just going through adding buildings there. And there was maybe two or three or four additional customers at that time. So it was really early days and a little unusual when you have, I think, eight or nine, yeah, about eight people then. I think I was the ninth, and all software developers or PhDs in building science. So was lucky to kind of come in as the first hire on the business side.
Yeah, you guys do have an incredible amount of PhDs for the size of the business. um, it's been nice rolling the years back. Do you ever get the chance, because of how quickly you move and just within the whole environment and how things are changing so quickly within this space? Do you ever get the chance to look back and just see what has been achieved?
It's a good question. Definitely not often enough. It's a lot of fun to do that because it's when you're in a grind and 12 years into this, you're still in some level of a grind, right? Because the goals are big and you're scaling an organization and try to mostly keep the head down and keep building and let that compounding growth do its job, right? So yeah, not often enough, and it is fun to look back and see on the achievements for sure.
I can attest to that. So you've got a busy year. You've got a lot of shows coming up. I think this is going to be one of the most active years that Clockworks is going to be in terms of the amount of shows that you're going to. You've obviously got the client summit. I'm not sure when that is. What are you most looking forward to this year?
Yeah, good question. Certainly looking forward to the client summit. That's a big deal for us. That'll be in September, and we just announced the dates on that. So that's just an amazing community that keeps building. And I guess I'll stick with that theme, which is that I'm really looking forward to that community building continuing to happen. So we're starting to have partners get together on calls more and starting to kind of ramp up the community because we're seeing a lot of interest in doing that, which just means clients connecting with each other, learning from each other, sharing best practices, how they're incorporating Clockworks into condition-based maintenance, into new construction and specifications and building commissioning, into energy reduction and decarbonization programs, into integrations with IWMS, CMMS, with Power BI for other reporting and asset management, and down the list. So seeing all that kind of information sharing is something that I'm really looking forward to continuing to learn from.
And dates have been announced. Location, is that, are you keeping that to yourself for the time being, or is that the same place as last year?
It'll be in Chicago right at the end of September. So clients have received invites on that, and as new clients come on, and they get invited to join as well.
Nice. Must have lost my invite in the post, but you know, we'll see. We'll see. Uh, shall
You're
we?
invited, Lewis.
There we go.
We'll make
There
sure
we
we
go.
send that over.
I had to force that one, but I'll take it. Shall we dive into the quick fire rounds?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, let's dive into the quick fire round. So, what's your proudest career achievement so far?
Wow. Yeah, that's really nice. I could say metrics given the role that I'm in. So maintaining 50% year over year growth for many years. But I think um, maybe more important to mention is just to share an anecdote instead that I'm really proud of, and just tremendously proud of the team here at Clockworks. That's really meaningful to me. And that's an amazing client of ours. You know who you are if you happen to listen to this, who regularly says that Clockworks is the vendor by which I judge all my other vendors. And that is absolutely such a meaningful statement that is really there's really nothing more important to me than that.
The bar's pretty high for those other vendors then, so it's a tough place to be. Um, what's one tool or software that you use that you can't live without day to day?
I would say Gong. It's been really helpful for us, and that's meeting recording and AI transcriptions and having that visibility as you're scaling an organization. One of the hardest things is not having the pulse anymore on all the different customer situations that are occurring, and being able to have that pulse through those call recordings and AI tools has been really helpful. It's usually used as a sales tool. We don't really use it so much as a sales management function, but more customer success and making sure that when a client has a very specific, for example, uh, something to do with integration or something that comes up on the call, rather than having to hold on, let me schedule a call for you with this person, grab that snippet, share it with the technical SME who can then hear it directly from the customer's mouth and address it directly. So Gong has been useful for us.
Yeah, it's an incredible tool. I have got a demo of them previously, but we're too small as a business to use them, I think, for it to be for it to make sense for Gong. What's a book or resource that has really transformed the way you sell or the way you lead?
A lot of very powerful books out there. I think the current one on my mind is Revenue Architecture by Winning by Design. That's a really tremendous organization, and what they've put out there. That's sort of when I reference that bow tie concept, and that's on the cover of that book. It's also quite a hefty, coffee table worthy book for certain go to market nerds, you could say. So revenue architecture, that's really a really cool recent one for me. And yeah, that's a good resource. And I guess the other recent one very much on my mind is Radical Candor, which is not totally new, but is excellent.
Great. And final question, if you could solve one major challenge within the smart building space, what would that be?
So I think what comes to my mind, the thing that I'm so passionate about that I would love to solve is helping facilities leaders be seen as a generator of value within their organizations rather than a cost center alone. That is my mission. And changing the conversation for how the assets that those facilities organizations are responsible for create value rather than just be a cost center on the financial statement.
Okay, great. Alex, this has been incredible to have you on. I've learned a ton myself. I'm sure there'll be others out there that have and may want to reach out to you. So I imagine LinkedIn is probably the best place to connect with you. And I can include your details in the show notes. But I really appreciate you coming on. This has been super fun.
Thanks, Lewis. Likewise, it's been great. Appreciate it.